Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Proper Variant and this is Victoria 3's Dev Diary number 65. Today we have patch 1.1 part 1, assuming there will be part 2, maybe even a part 3. 1.1 is a patch that will be coming before the end of the year, you can see it here as well, and to me, when I was reading this Dev Diary, that was incredibly concerning. I'll be honest with you, I read this and I was like, okay, wait a minute, but 1.0.5 isn't good enough to be around until the end of the year, right? And this is a concern that I felt the entire time, and I said this on Twitter recently as well. I think 1.0.5 is a patch that needs to disappear as soon as possible, because it makes it so that A, performance is very, very bad, B, we're looking at, of course, still a bunch of bugs, but that is not surprising at this point, I think. The other thing that is really bad is that this isn't a bug, but rather the state of the game currently leads to the AI constantly having rebellions within a rebellion, within a rebellion, within a rebellion, which then splinters the AI and makes it so that you have like 5 Austrias, 6 Austrias maybe even. That is just not good. That is a really bad situation for a patch to be at. I personally, I said it as well, I'm still on 1.0.3. I sat back, I said to myself, I'm not updating right now because it's just not good enough. Yes, sure, I have more bugs on 1.0.3, but ultimately I would rather have these bugs than, you know, a world that just falls apart. So, in my opinion, I was reading this dev diary and I was saying to myself, oh my god, end of the year, we need a patch like right now to fix 1.0.5, right? I can basically calm that fear, if you feel that fear as well, because some reason they address it at the end of the dev diary, but 1.1 will not be the next patch that will come for players of Victoria 3. We're also still working on another hotfix, 1.0.6, which will hopefully include some late game performance improvements and other fixes, and which we are aiming to release sometime next week. Now I gotta tell you, I hope that 1.0.6 will break the pattern of 1.0.4 and 1.0.5, which basically, they fixed things, but they changed a couple of variables. They changed, for example, radical creation, they changed how movements behave when they start being a revolution and so on. And by changing those values, they basically shot the game in the foot. It couldn't keep walking anymore. Everybody just collapses all the time. The game isn't challenging, especially in the mid-game. Even if it wasn't performing as poorly as it is, we're looking at a situation where it just doesn't work right. 1.0.6 needs to be a patch that makes performance better, and that then makes it so that balancing makes for at least a somewhat believable world. We can talk, and I think reasonably so, talk about whether the AI is competitive when fighting a player that is just reasonably proficient, I think, at playing the economy and the warfare and the diplomacy game here. But even that aside, right now the AI is basically just being sabotaged, and that needs to be fixed. I hope that since this patch comes next week rather than right now, for example, that patch will be a patch that doesn't cause major and very obvious issues as 1.0.5 currently does. Just so you know, that is where we're coming from right there. Obviously, I think the post-release patch support for Victoria 3 currently has been lackluster. It has been very much leading the game into a position where right after release, many people, I think, like myself, are rolling back to an earlier version, and that just shouldn't be the case this close to launch, right? Patches should fundamentally make the game better rather than break things again. Let's hope that 1.1.6 breaks that pattern. All of that aside, though, that is not what today's dev diary is about. I just wanted to address it because obviously that is the state of the game currently. Let's talk about patch 1.1. This patch 1.1 is going to primarily focus on game polish, bug fixing, balancing, AI improvements, and UI/UX work. When the next major free patch 1.2 is going to be more focused towards making progress on the plans we've outlined in our post-release plans DD by iterating on systems like warfare and diplomacy. With that said, there's a few more significant changes coming in 1.1 as well, which we are going to go over in this and next week's dev diary. So let's take a look at this, shall we? The first of these changes is a rework of the interface for individual pops, with a particular emphasis on improving the visualization of pop needs. In addition to the general overview, there are now separate tabs for economy and consumption, with economy showing a more detailed breakdown of the pop's income and expenditure, as well as their top 5 goods expenditures. The consumption tab showing a detailed breakdown of all their goods expenditures, along with price information for the state and market. We also plan to iterate on pop needs further in the future to give you a better idea of what your population needs are countrywide. So, let's talk about this, because I like the rework that is done here. I just don't think that it's enough, and I think that there should be some changes made even to this interface right here. If you look at the current interface, then you will recognize this right here. It's a fairly unorganized collection of, okay, what is going on? Some things are different. I don't think that expenses are, like, shown in this way. I could be wrong here, but yeah, some things are different. Fundamentally though, you might recognize this right here. What clearly changed is the fact that we now see the top 5 goods expenditures. I think this is a great change. I'm not sure whether this depiction is best. I would like something where maybe this is shown in this market scale, right? Instead of just seeing this, I would like it if I saw this, for example, right underneath here. You got the space here clearly in this UI, right? But either way, this is good. This shows you that grain is slightly over the market price, or over the base price, I should say. And currently, this pop spends over 1/4 of their weekly budget on grain alone. And that, of course, is information that immediately is actionable. I complained about this in my review, I complained about this elsewhere. I think most people do not make a meaningful connection to their pops because they never consult this window, because this window has very little going on for itself in terms of having actionable information. You can't really act on anything that is here without really hovering over it, looking at the tooltips, yada yada yada. This right here is the other part of this. So we got this tab economy now, and then here the consumption is a tab that basically gives you this overview. I gotta be honest with you. If I want to know what a pop spends a lot on, I don't know whether I will ever consult this over this, because this alone is, okay, so this also isn't perfect in my opinion, because looking at this, right, and I don't think you will ever care whether this pops consumes 442 or 15,000 units of grain. I think this will be completely irrelevant to you. The most important part is what kind of, cost does it make up of their weekly budget. You can see this right here. This is this column. And then how's the market price doing? Those are the things that you will care about. I would also actually like it if, it showed, for example, substitute goods and why they're substituting and what they're substituting for right here. Like a category. Rather than just listing the goods, I would really like it if it said, for example, basic food needs, right? And then currently, grain is fulfilling all of the basic food needs. If you build something else, let's say you build food industries and all of a sudden you have actual groceries, all of a sudden this will take over and you might even want to see a shift there. This table right here should tell you these things. This is already better than what we have right now in vanilla, but I personally think that this should expand into good need categories rather than just into needed goods, because a new player won't necessarily make the connection that if you have grain and groceries here at the same time, that these are substitutes for one another, right? That grain and groceries are basically competing. Groceries are much more efficient, but they're not always there. They don't exist fundamentally on the market. That is something I would definitely like to see. In general, though, this is a very, very useful window as it is in comparison to what we currently have. The thing that I primarily want to actually talk about here, because again, I like this window. I think the rework here is very, very good. What I do not like at all about this window, and this is something that is currently present in 1.0.5 as well, is this. Everything that we have here, I think, again, a couple of numbers. I'm not sure whether pop expenses are present in the current pop window, but even that aside, doesn't really play that big a role because that's not what I'm about to criticize. I want, and I need this window to be much more eye-guiding. I have about 250 hours, I think a bit more actually, in the game as of right now, and I have to tell you that when I open a pop window, because I do this sometimes, I look at it and I go, okay, wait a minute, how are you performing, where are you going with your wealth, that sort of stuff. My eyes need to manually read every piece of information before I know where I need to look, where I need to hover, what I need to actually examine a bit closer, right? There's no guidance in how this is listed. There's no separation here, there's no boxes, there's none of that, and there's no indication, for example, which of these numbers might give you a useful tooltip, because some of them do. Some of them really have a very useful tooltip, whereas others don't really. For example, net income, I'm pretty sure, and pop expenses as well, will actually tell you about the tax burden of that pop, and that is so important. Most players, I swear to God, and I know I'm like a broken clock, because I keep repeating myself, but most people, in my opinion, have no idea how tax burdens work in this game and how, for example, per capita taxation makes life of your lower class miserable because it extraordinarily and disproportionately taxes them, whereas the upper strata basically pays nothing in comparison because it's an absolute number that they're paying per head, right? Rather than a relative income-based number. These sort of things need to be visible right here because otherwise you won't understand, okay, why are you impoverished? Is it the tax burden? Is it the good expenditures? That sort of stuff should be visible. It should be visible. Separate all of these via boxes, right? Then separate, make it clear where there is a really useful tooltip and where there isn't a tooltip. And honestly, yeah, I personally think if you hover over the net income, it will also show you progress to the next level of wealth, right? To the next level of standard of living or wealth. It's one or the other. There's a slight distinction there, don't worry about it too much. I wish that was just a scale. Just show me a scale of like, I'm trending upwards or I'm trending downwards, right? Obviously, net income implies this, but Where are we really going here? Where are we really headed? I would love a UI element for that. There are so many things here when it comes to this where you can create a direct connection. I would love a bar diagram. Like, just give me a bar graph where it's like, out of my expenditures, obviously, yes, these are most of the goods, but then check out how I am doing with my tax burden and give me a comparative number, how that compares to, for example, an upper strata pop. What is the average tax burden in these stratas? These sort of things are absent. So I don't like how this is listed here, because none of it guides your eye. Yes, there are some green numbers, yes, there are some red numbers, but which of these numbers are useful, which of these numbers you need isn't at all highlighted in any way whatsoever. The net income here is so vital, and you need to like manually basically pull your view down there. And on top of that, I would like it if we, instead of needing to hover over this to see certain tooltips, we would also get that here as, for example, a scale or as a progress bar, much like this one, right? Currently, we don't have that. Again, this window is significantly better than what we have in vanilla. But my god, I really would love it if we could get some more order in here and if we could get some more graphical representation in here. Graphical representation is the lifeblood of connecting to your pops in this game. That is my opinion anyway. Yeah, let me know what you think, obviously, but basically, I like these changes. I just wish that they went even further. As far as these windows are concerned, yeah, as I said in the review, I think most people do never interact with these windows, but these windows need to make an extra effort to get people to interact with them, because, man, there is so much really important information right here, and you can see that the devs clearly understand that as well, right? This gives you actionable information. You now know, okay, I need to act on this, I need to act on that. But there's so much more analytical goodness in here that could be very easily understood by any player, but that sadly isn't displayed unless you know exactly where to look. Anyway, let's move on. The next significant change in 1.1 is a rework of legitimacy. Some frequent criticisms we have received about the political system in Victoria 3 is that legitimacy doesn't matter enough and isn't clear enough about its effects, as well as that elections don't have enough of an impact. This rework aims to resolve all those problems by making several changes. Very good approach, let's take a look at it. First, legitimacy, while still a number from 0 to 100, is now divided into 5 categories with differing effects, some of which will increase or decrease based on the actual number and not just the threshold. So you can see there are basically 5 levels here, 0 to 24, 25 to 49, 50 to 74, 75 to 89, and then the very top 90 to 100. They now give you bigger effects than I can't pass a law or I can pass a law. This in itself is a really good change in my opinion. This government is considered blatantly illegitimate by most everyone in the country. This legitimacy level reduces the approval of all opposition IGs, makes it impossible to enact laws, and generates a steady stream of radicals in increased numbers the lower legitimacy is. Very cool, I like it. Unacceptable government. This government is generally not considered acceptable to the people of the country. Laws can be enacted, but opposition IGs will disapprove and radicals will be created over time, though in amounts less than in an illegitimate government. Fair enough, you can run with that. Contested government. This government is considered to have somewhat shaky foundations. Opposition IGs will disapprove slightly, but otherwise there are no ill or good effects, so this is basically the status quo. Then legitimate government. This government is considered proper and legitimate. Over time, a small number of loyalists will be generated. With increased numbers, the higher legitimacy is. And then righteous government. This government's legitimacy is considered to be unassailable. In addition to generating loyalists over time, enactment time for new laws is cut in half. I like this in general. Make this more impactful. I'm completely in favor of this. I do have a major note, but we're going to get to that once we get to the actual overview here. The way you gain legitimacy has also been altered in democracies, with a share of votes rather than just clout represented in government now having a direct effect on legitimacy, the degree to which depends on the laws. Under more restrictive voting systems, clout can still be more important than votes, but as more of the population becomes enfranchised, votes grow in importance, and under universal suffrage, it should be virtually impossible for a government that doesn't have the voters behind it to be considered legitimate. Let's talk about this, right? Despite being the largest party in terms of clout, the Whigs alone are not considered legitimate due to only commanding 47% of the votes in the last election. So, the trouble with this right here is that yes, the Whigs aren't enough to run this election. You can see this is 1836, right? Because this is still William. This is not Victoria. She's still waiting as the heir apparent. The problem, and this is a problem that fundamentally is not solved by the changes to legitimacy. In general, let's just, recapitulate this. I think these changes are really good. They make it more impactful, they make it more interesting. I love playing democracies as is, and further democratizing, making it so that I have to swing with the voters, not a bad idea at all. But, let's take a look at this. We have intelligentsia, industrialist, trade unions. Since this is one party, they count as a single IG for the purposes of legitimacy calculation. You get a penalty the more IGs, the more factions basically you have in your government, but right now we only have one faction. It is the Whig party. Now the other party, I assume they are the Tories, right? If you pull them over, they only count as one faction as well. But these are the only parties that were running. So we're looking at a situation where I guarantee you that in this system, I can put the only two parties that were running together into government, and we still get incredibly high legitimacy. Maybe 90 even. Maybe 95. I've done this before. It's so easy if you have major party blocks in your country to get 100% legitimacy. If you have two party blocks, you can always stash both of them in government, and you will literally be fine. That is bad. I am of the opinion that this system, as much as it changes how much you need to watch out for legitimacy, doesn't properly address the fact that since the player manually can fully determine who is and who isn't in government, can just stash everybody in government. It doesn't matter. It'll be completely fine. So where I'm coming from here is that there needs to be some sort of limitation. I'll be honest with you, I don't have an idea of what that actually might be without breaking several other systems of the game. As I said, Victoria 3 is an insanely well-connected game, and that makes establishing ideas much, much harder than any other game. But on a fundamental level, putting the Whigs and the Tories together in government should not work. I think that there needs to be a different calculation either behind legitimacy, or you should simply be banned from putting these two into government. But then it doesn't make sense, because once you have, let's say you have 6 parties, what do you do then? How do you ban them? Where do you go from there? I gotta be honest with you, I don't know the solution, but I don't see the changes made here as something that will actually fix how you will run your country in a democracy. Because all you need to do to fix this is put the Tories into government as well, boom, 100% legitimacy, you'll be fine, right? As far as democracies are concerned, this should add to how they feel if you roleplay into it, if you, for example, purposely don't put the Tories into government, but this won't limit you from just putting them into government, you'll be fine. So, I don't know. Something still needs to change here. I'm not sure how exactly you do it, but my concern is that this does not fix democracies at all. The core issue of parties simply being too good to not put into government doesn't really get addressed here. Let me know what you think, of course, as well. Now, lastly for today, we have also made a balancing change to the church and state and citizenship laws. Previously, the only balancing consideration for those laws was that less tolerance gave more authority, which we felt was neither particularly balanced nor really a complete representation of the reasons that a country might want to discriminate against part of their population. To try and address this, we've made it so that by default, slightly more radicals are created by standard of living decreases than loyalists from standard of living increases. But offset this with modifiers on the more restrictive laws that increase loyalist and reduce radical gain among the accepted parts of the population. The more restrictive your cultural religious tolerance, the greater the effect on the part of the population that actually falls within it. I like this. I really love this. As somebody that loves running a very, very sort of a regressive country, where, you know, you want your population to challenge you. For example, I love doing runs where I keep serfdom, for example, right? You keep serfdom, and you see and you wait and you check whether people rebel against you. I gotta tell you, so far they don't really do it, but now you have a greater benefit from this, but people, of course, also get more upset. Minus 10% radicals from standard of living decreases, and plus 10% loyalists from standard of living increases. This is nice. It buffs something that deserves to be buffed, in terms of playability and viability. It makes it much more viable compared to total separation or freedom of conscience, and it makes it more interesting. Because all of a sudden you build a core of loyalists, but you might be facing people that otherwise will be very, very angry as well. I like this change. This is a great change. I got nothing else to say about it, I think. That's it for today. Next week we're going to continue talking about patch 1.1, which, as I said, is at the beginning of the dev diary, is planned to be released before the end of the year. Right, and then 1.0.6 will be coming sometime next week. In conclusion, let's hope that 1.0.6 will be a good patch, that will be a patch that fixes the core gameplay and performance issues. The core gameplay issue that I mean here is that the AI basically has a breakdown. This is something that shouldn't be happening. This is something that completely destroys any run. Needs to be fixed. 1.0.6 hopefully breaks the cycle of current post-release patches for Victoria 3. The other side of the coin is that I really, really hope that 1.1 goes even deeper on restructuring this menu. Because I think this one is just, it's so sort of like, just, it doesn't guide you at all. in like giving you important information. This one, much more guiding, right? You got this right here, boom, you know exactly where you need to touch base on. Right here, you need to hover over all of these to see the tooltips. There are no separations between any of these boxes. There's no hierarchy, there's no listing. Yeah, let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to 1.1. I personally will... somebody actually asked me about this as well. Let me just address this for a second. I will not be doing like a Let's Play or anything until at the earliest 1.1. We have currently how this game feels in terms of the world falling apart. I get that, right? But I'm also looking at a situation where I think things are going to change so drastically in the coming months that doing a Let's Play would be a mistake unless it's a very short one. And, you know, similar to the legitimacy issues, similar to, like, how do you roleplay when the best option is clearly to just form a gigantic alliance between the Whigs and the Tories, right? I will probably get to that point where I want to do that later. For the moment, I do think we might be looking at a couple of more live streams. I think those are fun, but yeah, long-term games need to basically... That's something I'm looking at after more patches, right? With all that being said, though, this is the end of the Dev Diary. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about my suggestions and my concerns for what is coming our way here. And I'll see you later, Alligator.